What is a bust? Usually, it's a player who underperforms relative to their draft position. Over the course of NBA history, there have been a ton of busts, but there are different reasons as to why they become busts. Sometimes they don't have the motivation or drive to get better, other times maybe they weren't drafted to the right situation, and must play in an environment that they're not used to. Maybe they just flat out don't have the talent to succeed in the NBA. We've seen players dominate college, but their skills don't translate to the pros. Or maybe they were just drafted too high to begin with. How's it going, fellas? My name's Andy, and after reading Darius Miles' story on the Players Tribune, I wanted to make a video about him myself. Today, we're gonna take a look at the story of Darius Miles. Despite having all the talent and all the athleticism in the world, the cards were still stacked against him. Born in 1981, our story starts off in East St. Louis, Illinois. At one point, it was one of the biggest cities in the States, but over the last 50 to 60 years, the population there has continued to dwindle. Part of it has to do with the high crime rates. In a 2013 report, East St. Louis had a homicide rate that's 18 times the average in the United States. According to Darius Miles from the Players Tribune, when you pop out of the womb in East St. Louis, it's guns, drugs, and danger from start to finish. And I'm not saying that to brag or nothing. It's just what it is. It's the murder capital. And the thing about it is that it's only 89 blocks. So no matter who you are or how much you try to keep your head down, there's nowhere to hide. You're in it. There's no choice. It's impossible for anybody to relate to how tough it is to grow up in that neighborhood unless they've actually been there. Miles said that he's been shot many times and have seen many of his friends get shot and killed right in front of his eyes. Also, according to Miles, there's only been one basketball player who made it out of East St. Louis. A guy by the name of LaFonso Ellis, who made it to the NBA and never came back. It was a city where dreams were never crushed because it was foolish for anybody there to have dreams to begin with. Anyway, while the world around Miles was collapsing, he himself continued to focus on what he did best, playing basketball. In his 3 years playing basketball in high school, Miles made a name for himself as arguably the greatest high school player in the country. At the time, it was between him or Kwame Brown, which, looking back in hindsight, it was kinda funny. It's quite surprising that neither of them turned out to be good. However, during the time there, Miles, standing at 6 foot 8 inches tall, averaged 22 points, 13 rebounds, and 7 blocks per game, while basically playing all 5 positions. The crowds in their small high school gym were filled to the brink with fans. Fans who cheered him on, supported him, tried to get his autograph, and also gave him encouragement to declare for the NBA draft. And eventually, Miles did choose to forego college and entered directly to the NBA. Entering the 2000 NBA draft straight out of high school, Darius Miles got selected by the Los Angeles Clippers at number 3. As a young 18-year-old moving from East St. Louis to LA, it was a huge culture shock for him, but at the same time, it was what he wanted. A breath of fresh air, a change of scenery to move on to the next stage of his life. His first couple of years in LA did not result in a playoff appearance, but those teams were actually really fun to watch. It included Miles, Lamar Odom, Quentin Richardson, Corey Maggette, Elton Brand. They were all so young and filled with energy. Off the court, Miles had his fair share of great stories, including the time where he met Michael Jordan. Jordan sent Miles and his family free shoes, and as a young teenager, that excited him a lot. Another time was when Shaq invited him over to his house and he got to meet a lot of celebrities there. Stuff like this was very common in Los Angeles, especially if you were a young, up-and-coming basketball star like Miles. Unfortunately, the Clippers gave up on Miles pretty quickly. While he showed his insane athleticism and could explode to the rim at will, he literally had no jump shot whatsoever. It's not like high school where he could just jump over everybody. In his 2 years with the Clippers, he averaged about 9 points, 5 or 6 rebounds a game, and made at least one highlight play every single game. But he needed to improve in other areas of the game. However, the Clippers did not want to wait. At the end of the 2001-2 season, Miles was traded to the Cleveland Cavaliers for Andre Miller. Cleveland was not any better. They were also rebuilding and felt like Miles had potential to be a major piece for the team. But that experiment ended very quickly too. After just 1.5 seasons where Miles did not make any improvements and fell out of the rotation, the Cavs traded him. He did have a moment when a reporter asked him about LeBron James, and this is what he had to say.
I don't think you can really just bring a high school player in and really just think your team gonna really turn around like that. You know what I'm saying? He can just hop on our bandwagon.
You know, looking back in hindsight, it's pretty funny, but at the time, it made sense. At least the first part did. We've never seen a player come straight from high school and immediately make an impact on the team. High school players usually start off slow and need some time to grow. Well, up until LeBron showed up. Anyway, by 2004, Miles would get traded to the Portland Trail Blazers, joining the later part of the Jail Blazers era. Right when he got there, him and coach Maurice Cheeks did not have a great relationship. During a film session, Cheeks was criticizing his lackluster defense and Miles responded by cussing him out. When Cheeks became fed up and started to walk to the GM's office, Miles apparently shouted, "Yeah, that's right, run to your daddy." This altercation would lead to Miles getting a 2-game suspension. Apparently, the stuff he was saying was so bad that Cheeks even considered quitting. Despite the rough start, Miles actually had his best seasons in Portland. From 2004 to 2006, he was averaging about 13 points a game. On April 19, 2005, he even scored a career-high 47 points. Now, at this point of Miles' career, he was 24 years old, but this was pretty much the player he's destined to be. Occasionally, he would show flashes of brilliance, but for the most part, he would remain as a hyper-athletic role player, and nothing more than that. In the following season, Miles got off to a hot start, but then... yeah, yikes. In April of 2006, he suffered a gruesome knee injury, an injury that caused him to get microfracture surgery and miss the next 2 seasons entirely. This injury also caused some controversy because Miles was still owed $18 million on the remainder of his contract, but the Blazers said that it was severe enough to be considered as a career-ending injury, thus removing Miles' contract from the salary cap. However, Miles would actually return to the court in 2009, thus triggering the $18 million salary towards Portland's cap. But when he came back, he played for the Grizzlies, and overall this whole thing was a mess. Miles did return to the courts briefly, but that was basically it. He officially retired after that season and finished his career without a single appearance in the playoffs. Looking back at the 2000 NBA draft class, it was, in my opinion, the worst draft class ever, and Miles was one of the biggest busts in history. However, there was a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes too. His mother also passed away from cancer, which caused him to fall into a deep depression. For an entire year, he never left his house, he never responded to any text messages, and he was on the verge of giving up. In 2016, he even filed for bankruptcy as he lost millions of dollars on businesses that were really sketchy. He was over $200,000 in debt and had to auction off a bunch of his own items to cover it. Looking at the list of stuff he sold, most of it was NBA gear, signed by guys like LeBron, Larry Bird, Dirk, and even his former teammate Lamar Odom. Additionally, there were some other items like guns and other miscellaneous things. You know, before that Players Tribune article about Miles came out recently, nobody was really talking about him. Yeah, he'd come up in a conversation once in a while, but for the most part, he's been silent for the last 10 years or so. Honestly, I thought this article was a great read. It made me want to look up more stuff about Miles and his NBA career because his story was way different than the average NBA player today. Even for the players with a rough upbringing, they pale in comparison to Miles' story. I took some quotes from the Players Tribune article earlier, but there's a lot of good stuff there. Even if you have no idea who Darius Miles is, you could still read it. It shows a different perspective. It describes the journey of an NBA player through hardships and misfortune. I definitely recommend it, and I'll put a link in the description below. Anyway, nowadays he seems to be doing pretty well. He moved to Florida and lives close to his friend Quentin Richardson. He's been slowly trying to get his life back on track, but it's getting better. And that sums up the story of Darius Miles. He used to be one of the most hyped up high school players in the country, and he had all the physical tools to succeed in the NBA. However, a myriad of different problems caused his downfall. While his legacy was a bust who never lived up to his potential, there was so much more to his story than what people realized. Anyway, thank you everyone so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, I'll see you next time. Peace.